Okay, with that, I believe we are now live. Welcome, everyone. So things are a little bit different now on Wednesdays. We have gone from Feminist Book Club to almost MENding Book Club. I don't know, that's what our last social turned into. So today and for any upcoming Wednesdays, we are going to be talking with some facilitators from our MENding program, which is all about engaging men in ending gender-based sexual violence. So today I have Ryan joining me. Welcome.
Hello.
It's a bit of a special day for you, isn't it?
A little, well, yeah. Oh, don't need to put all the attention on me.
He's celebrating a special day. So Ryan, where are you tuning in from?
I'm in Owen Sound, Ontario right now at the depths of my parents' basement, where I've been spending the last 2 months socially
Nice.
isolating and yeah.
Okay, cool. So what got you started? What made you want to get involved with this program and want to engage men in this really tough conversation?
So there's a number of reasons. One of the larger ones I would say is I was kind of looking for ways um, to kind of insert myself into these conversations. And kind of instead of being more of a bystander, actually learn how to intervene in an effective way when situations do arise. In particular, in my workplace, I work as a server and bartender and have been for the last 7 or 8 years. So issues of sexual harassment, sexual violence, I've witnessed many times in the workplace. And depending on the workplace, sometimes they were handled very well by managers and other people, and other times they were not handled at all. So I kind of wanted to learn what might be some ways to kind of deal with these encounters in a respectful way, that kind of, helps the person who's being targeted and also kind of helps us maintain integrity and respect and things like that. So
Hmm. Definitely. I feel like a lot of people are able to recognize when something's off, when something's not right, but it's how do I get involved? How do I overcome those barriers of involvement to do something? And I love what we talk about with our bi-center intervention work, but I feel like that's always the presentation that people are really looking forward to because they're just like, okay, like this is cool. Like some stuff I understand and I know, and you learn a little bit more along the way. Life is a learning journey or whatever. But like how do we get involved and how do we do something and what are the different strategies? Throughout the MENding program, what are some things that really stood out to you?
Um, good question. So really, kind of the very first activity that we do, or the first activity I did, the man box activity, is something that has stuck with me. I mean, ever since I've done it, and it's something I continually think of. Just kind of how we view the men around us and what our ideas of what masculinity is. And when we kind of begin to look at, okay, who are the people we really look up to and how do they compare to those ideas of masculinity, and kind of developing the discrepancy between those two things is something that I kind of really challenged me and got me thinking in a whole new way. So
Mhm.
that would be the number one.
Mhm. It's kind of like, what is the stereotypical man, the man that we ought to be versus the men that we look up to and admire and care about? And what we find is the characteristics of both there are some similarities, but they're very, very different. And one thing that comes up is the topic of toxic masculinity. What does that mean to you? And do you take offense to that term?
Um, I don't take offense to that term. I do realize it is a very polarizing term, and people have a lot of thoughts about that term. Um, and I mean, that's fine. When I think of toxic masculinity, I think of certain traits, masculine traits that maybe no longer benefit us. Maybe in one way were beneficial in like ages ago, and now don't really serve a purpose in 2020. Um, I think of heightened aggression. Um, I think of kind of having to be the person who's always right, kind of like man of the house, or the man's word gets the final say type thing. And yeah, the topic of, I was really hoping we didn't actually talk about this and talk more about masculinity and kind of what that means currently, comparing traditional views on masculinity to more current ideas. But people really love to go down that toxic masculinity road, which is, I mean, I knew you were gonna jump that one on me. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, let's talk about it. The thing with the man box, when we're looking at very stereotypical things of what a man ought to be, I've done this work with grade fives. I've done this work with university students. I've done this work with adult males in our community, and it's literally the same kind of man box that keeps coming up again and again. And we talk about, men are not allowed to show emotion, but the only emotion they're allowed to show is aggression. And, the only time that you can show emotion, or any time that it's like, okay, is, when you've been drinking, because you come home from your job and you have a beer. And that is something that grade sevens have told me. So like, this isn't like magical stuff I'm making up. So, let's talk about, go ahead, like, let's talk about traditional masculinity versus kind of like what it's being transformed into.
Sure. So, I mean, I think when I think of modern masculinity, I think more about independence and being self-sufficient and kind of you looking after yourself and not accepting the help of others, or only doing so in like very dire circumstances, and kind of justifying your refusal of help to, okay, someone else needs that. There's someone else that's more willing or deserving of that help. When really you could very well benefit from being helped. So when I think of more modern masculinity, that's kind of what first comes to mind. More traditional masculinity, I think of kind of words like breadwinner, like the man makes all the money, the man's in charge of the house, his word is law type thing. And I mean, some of those things still hold up today, but I think there has been a shift over time. And I think the idea of modern masculinity is changing. But
Yeah, I feel that when I'm doing the man box, that I really have to talk about what is the stereotypical man. And because people are like, oh, like they're caring and sweet, and like that's what a man is. A man is just a human being. And so to really go back to like what's so deeply like embedded in us within what a man ought to be, I think it becomes almost difficult to talk about it in a way, because I think it's so like ingrained that you have to be a certain type of person in order to be a man, and that like you're not enough. I think that there are some shifts, and I find it interesting that you talk about reaching out for help, because we see so much more work with mental health and men and mental health.
mm-hmm. I find it very interesting how part of being a man is not talking about these things and not talking about your emotions and not talking about the things that trouble you. And I think that's starting to get a little bit better. And I think that's one reason why I've enjoyed my experiences with the MENding program so much, is having the space to talk with other men about things that really matter and we really care about, that we otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable talking, I mean, with maybe our friends with, or our parents or our loved ones, which I feel kind of getting the experience to talk about these things kind of opens that up to discuss these things with people closer to you.
And that there's so much more there than just like wanting to open up and talk about your emotions, but like there's so much like suppression that I think a lot of men experience, that oh, I shouldn't talk about this because it's going to impact my character, it's going to impact how people think about me. And I think it's really hard for men to kind of like break through that shell of just like, what, like I'm here and this is who I am, and if that doesn't fit your definition, then that's that's your issue, not mine. And I think that a lot of guys really struggle with that, really struggle with being okay with listening to themselves.
Well, I think we spend years kind of building up this facade and of who we ought to be or who society or who our friends, our family thinks we should be. And when we start to peel that back, that can be a really difficult thing.
Hmm. Was it difficult for you?
Yeah, I would say so. It's certainly been a journey and a transition. Like I originally was a very passive person and didn't address a lot of things in my life. And I think kind of being more assertive about my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions um, has kind of been a step forward for me.
When you say that you've become more assertive in your thoughts, feelings, and opinions, what do you mean by that?
Um, how did I know you were gonna say that? So I guess before, I wasn't your typical uh, masculine male per se. I definitely did have a more maybe not dismissive, but more passive style, more passive demeanor. And I just felt that that wasn't really benefiting me and benefiting the people around me. And I needed to be more vocal about um, how I felt, in my experiences, and how I've kind of seen things to really, truly, um, get to a place where I want to be and not be kind of dictated by the world around me and by others, I guess. I don't know if that
Why do
makes
you think
sense, but
it's so hard for men to not, or hmm, to like not feel as if they're being dictated by the world around them, to, because like I feel like a lot of guys are just like, yo, I'm just like my own bro, like this is just, which is just how we do it. But like, why do you think that there's this external pressure, and why maybe men have a hard time identifying that there is an external pressure to fit in?
I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think media plays a very large part in that, and like a lot of the movies, television shows, what have you, really kind of focuses on like that inner instinct to rebel or and to be the one man show basically. And in movies it's very entertaining, but in real life it doesn't really serve us as well.
Hmm. And I think about too, like obviously we're two white people talking about this, but even like when we bring different intersections of ability, of race, and how of socioeconomic status, of ethnic identity, like all these different intersections really have kind of a stereotypical role in how we see it in the media. And I think that that's definitely changing. We look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for example, and we've got a gay black, was it commander in chief? I think his name is, I can't remember his name right now, but
Captain Holt.
yeah,
Yeah.
Captain Holt. Yeah, and how, that really kind of like shifts the box in a way. It's kind of like pushing against it, but he still has this very stoic, very, I'm focused, I'm in charge. And if you're not focused and in charge, then you don't fit. But then we have Terry Crews, who's like, I just want to be with my daughter, and like I'm having weight issues. So but yeah, like when we look at the media, like there's definitely this like a real man shaves and or doesn't shave or grows his beard but only in a certain way, and manscaping, and you have a man razor and male deodorant, and like it just keeps like reinforcing this box, this is the only definition that a man can be.
Yeah, when I think of those shaving commercials, I always laugh. And in comparison to the female shaving commercials, where it's
Oh,
everything's just so silky and smooth, and for men it's like rugged. Yeah, it's like, what is the point of this?
well, I think the point is to fit everyone into that box and keep buying that product. So what was it? Was it Old Spice? No. What was it? Gillette, the best a man can get, like, and that commercial. Do you know what commercial I'm talking about?
I know the tagline, but maybe
Yeah,
not
like
the specific
where
commercial.
it essentially like it spoke out against toxic masculinity and like
Oh yes, yeah,
yeah,
you're right. Yeah,
Yeah, do you have any, I don't know if you remember it, but do you have any thoughts on that commercial?
I remember kind of the controversy that surrounded it, and the what seemed like hordes of men announcing they would never buy a Gillette product again,
Yeah.
which I don't know if anyone actually fulfilled that promise, but yeah, I remember that being what seemed just like a very simple message and delivered in a very kind of like neutral way. Like, I don't feel like Gillette was shaming anyone with that commercial. It was kind of like, we need to do better. And for men to kind of come out and say, you know what, now I will never buy this product again because they are conforming to some sort of agenda. It's like, well, that's unfortunate.
Why do you think there's such pushback when we talk about things like toxic masculinity or that men need to change? Why do you think there's that pushback?
uh, I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think because people kind of take that stuff personally. They feel that they're being attacked, they're being challenged. And I think a lot of it, or a part of it, is this kind of defense mechanism comes up, and I need to challenge that because I am being targeted here, um, which I think is not true whatsoever. Um, but I think people also find these conversations very uncomfortable, and it's very easy to kind of deflect things just by saying, like, no, this isn't true, or no, I don't want to deal with this, and let's go back to what the status quo or what I was doing previously. Um, so
Where do you think that deflection comes from of like, this is ridiculous, not me?
um, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I guess it could come from many different places. I mean, from how you grew up and how you dealt with conflict to um, just kind of not addressing those, like, because people have very strong feelings about these things, and I think it's a way of shutting down those feelings.
Mhm. And I think that the one feeling that may come up for some folks is guilt as well. Like I know that learning more about sexual violence, learning more about um, gender conforming kind of things, it really made me uncomfortable at first learning about them because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have slut shamed women before. I have, said inappropriate things. There are times when I laughed at an inappropriate comment or joke when I know I should have done something. And I think that, especially with men, they men are sexual. They're supposed to want to they're supposed to be dominant. They're supposed to like obtain a woman, and if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And I think that that all kind of reinforces this attitude of like, I need to be dominant and in control, and if any point I feel vulnerable, then I'm not being myself, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, I would say that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I One reason I really quite like the mending program is because I felt that had I have kind of had some of these discussions, been a part of some of these trainings, that there would have been times where I would have been able to react differently as a young person. Um, it maybe avoided some situations that maybe I'm not the most proud of, or that turned out to be incredibly awkward. And just having a little bit of insight beforehand could have just avoided those things entirely. So I think that's a big part of why I got involved with this too. It's like, okay, by having these conversations, maybe some people won't have to go down some of the roads that I did. I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
I'm not sure. Have you come to any of our school presentations? I feel like that's mainly, I know you've,
Not yet, but I'm hoping to.
yeah, yeah, I'll be talking to Lucas, who's done quite a few presentations with youth, and it's just it's so refreshing to just like, because youth, they don't have a filter. They just like, they'll just say the things. And the big thing as a facilitator, that I really try to remember is that people ask questions, especially youth in particular. they say things, they ask questions because they're seeing it and they don't necessarily know how to respond. So, when we hear these inappropriate comments and inappropriate jokes and maybe inappropriate questions, it's because they're seeing it and they don't necessarily know how to respond. So, the comment that we hear about, oh, well, 97% of men are guilty of perpetrating sexual violence, but what about the 3%? Why are we ignoring the 3%? Women do it too, so why are they not part of this conversation? And so, like, they hear these types of comments out in the real world. Oh, you're just attacking men. Oh, all the feminists are trying to take over the world. And so, like, they're hearing these things and they just don't know how to respond. And so I think it's like so important that, we have these conversations, obviously in like a age appropriate manner. We're not talking, actually, you know what, like sometimes there's porn stars that are brought up in present and with grade 7s that they bring up that they want to talk about. And it's just because like, that's just what they're seeing and it's what they have questions about.
Yeah, and we can't deny those things. We just can't ignore them. We know these things are happening. We know, I mean, when youth ask these questions, it's coming from somewhere. So it's important for us to engage in this dialogue and for all of us to learn more, really.
There's been some things that I have seen online about role modeling behavior, and that by the age of 5, people are like, I guess, children, toddlers, now know about certain things about racism. They now know about inequality, or they know what their place is essentially because of the role model that they see from their parents. So it's like, it's a huge, like parents have like a huge responsibility, and teaching young people about equality, about equity, about respect, about these like systems of oppression that is literally killing men.
Mm-hmm. It's hi. What do I want to say about that? Yeah, it's wild. There was the one study regarding, I think, 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds that were able to identify like racist behaviors essentially. And that up until that point, like babies would show no behavior, no racial behaviors, but as soon as they're taught about race, they then kind of enact the same behaviors that are being modeled to them from a very, very young age.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty outstanding. Not something I would have certainly thought. I think those first years are so critical in development, and I think we often think that, oh, if a baby's not going to remember something, that's not going to affect them later on in life, and I think that is the exact opposite. I think from 0 to 2, when a baby's not verbal or a baby may not remember things, those things are really transformative and are kind of indicative to how someone will act, behave later on in life.
Mm-hmm. I'm just seeing on Facebook, William Logan. Now, William was a part of the first cohort of MENding, so a couple before yours. It said, MENding is the best. William's been on a couple of our TikToks, which is pretty awesome. And then Jade was saying, a black doll and a white doll in my class in JK. I remember knowing the difference.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it just, the thing with my thoughts on feminism is that women, and I definitely speak about general, but like I feel like women have done quite a bit, done quite a bit. We've gained the right to vote. Well, like not every woman gained the right to vote in 1920s, but there's been steps towards equity, equality. What I feel like needs to happen is that men almost need to recognize that they can be themselves in a way. And so the example I use is like a female doctor. okay, like, yeah, maybe there's going to be a little bit of pushback, maybe there's going to be some sexist comments thrown in there, but generally speaking, people are going to be like, okay, like, yeah, duh. But a stay-at-home dad, all of a sudden we go, oh, well, you know, he's sacrificing for the family. Oh, he must be injured. Oh, he must be, you know, experiencing this harm, and that, you know, he needs to do this for the family. And it's like, all of a sudden we start excusing the behavior of a stay-at-home dad. And so that is where, you know, I feel as if men have a lot of struggles. We look at like suicide, and that men, have higher suicide rates, they have higher dropout rates, they have more issues with mental health. And I feel like that like really all comes down to like suppression. And, you know, like I can't even count the number of times that that men come and talk, or like guy friends came and talked to me about their problems because they just didn't have anyone else to talk to.
Hmm. And yeah, I think that's incredibly common. And there's I think there's more spaces available now for men to talk about these things, but I still think there's not nearly enough, and I think there's so much more we can do. One space which I think this is quite, when I keep hearing this example over and over, is barbershops are the space where men can kind of go in and talk to someone about their issues. And barbers are kind of becoming mental health workers in some ways, or counselors in some ways, for a lot of men, which I think is quite cool and potentially quite scary in some ways, depending on who your barber is. But I think that's so neat. And there's now, I think I saw something a couple of months ago about a barbershop or chain of barbershops in the States that are all, the barbers are getting more training as far as like counseling skills and things like this, so that they can more accurately and in a better way kind of like work through some of these things, or be able to provide resources so that some of these men can get help in other places.
Mm-hmm. Warren Clark, he's a researcher out of Wilfrid Laurier University, out of Laurier, looking at was it like Afro-Caribbean males and just essentially like their lives and masculinity. And he ran like a symposium, and he called it like a barbershop. And so, you know, like you think about, that's a place where you're going and you're sitting for 20, 40 hour, depending on, you know, what you're doing with your hair. And you just, you know, have that quiet space to kind of like talk about things. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, like women have already been doing this. Like the hair salon was a place where, especially like when it comes to domestic violence in the home, the thing is that people will harm people where other people can't see. So in the hairline, or like underneath, like in the stomach area and stuff, is where these things will happen. So like hairdressers will like kind of feel that and be like, whoa, and they're like, oh, I just hit my head. And so, you know, I think the hair salon, or really the whole beauty community, is somewhere where I think we really need to target our work, and that, so that they're able to handle disclosure, they're able to know resources, to know the signs and symptoms, and to have these conversations in a healthy and productive way, not counterproductive.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly. I think it's so interesting that people are willing, and I mean, it totally makes sense, that people are willing to kind of discuss some of their deepest, darkest secrets and problems with someone who's essentially a complete stranger. Just kind of that anonymity just gives people protection.
Well, you know, with going to hair salons or beauty places, like you only see them maybe, it depends on the process, what you're doing, but you go maybe every once a month, maybe every 6 months, depending on what you're doing. So it's like you don't have to see that person every day. And the thing too is that, you know, in the service industry, and you and I can relate to this, I've been involved with the restaurant industry for 11 years, is that like you have to be sympathetic, or you have to be empathetic. You have to really like meet your client where they are at and really listen to them, hear what they're saying, hear what they're wanting, what, you know, what their needs are. And so, you know, maybe we have like a whole different like empathy skill where we actually have to listen to our clients. We have to really like be there with them to understand what they want, what their needs are. And so I feel like when, you know, it's like you feel heard, that okay, like this person is doing this process on my head and they're doing what I want, therefore they're listening to me, therefore I can trust them.
Hmm.
I know clinicians at our center say that they are not the first person, or say that clients say that we are not the first person that they have told about their trauma, that they've typically talked about trauma with other people and they didn't really care. And
Hmm.
so if that person doesn't care, then who else will? And it doesn't really seem like many people will. And so, you know, when you feel listened, you feel heard, you feel trusted, you're going to open up more.
For sure. And I think it's, I mean, having these conversations and kind of being on the other end of hearing someone disclose their trauma, I mean, that could be really, really difficult to react to or know how to react. And I think a lot of people just generally don't know how to react and just think like, oh, if we can just kind of brush this off, or if I can say 2, 3 words, be sympathetic or whatever, then we can kind of move past this because this is uncomfortable for me. Uh, then I feel like that happens all too often.
I feel like that's going to be I feel like that might be somewhere where we take the mending program now, is to, I don't know, maybe it's going to be a new kind of thing that comes up, who we want to train and who we want to talk to. Hi. So, you know, Ryan, as we're wrapping up here, if there are guys out there listening to this conversation, maybe they're uncomfortable, maybe they are interested in what you're talking about, but not really sure how to carry on this conversation, what is the message that you have for the men out there that are listening?
Um, I would say just be open to having these conversations and kind of sit with that discomfort and kind of be curious about where that discomfort comes from, and be curious why these conversations are happening, because they're happening for a good reason. And it's really easy to kind of just have that initial discomfort come out as you're in a reaction that is maybe not the most positive. So I would say sit with things for a little bit, be curious, and kind of look inwards, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a difficult process to think about the essence of who you are and why certain pieces of that might be toxic, and how that toxicity is impacting other people. Now for you, your intent may be, oh, I'm here, I'm doing a great job, you know, I'm supporting the people. I know that, you know, one thing that was brought up, actually it was during the mending that you were running, was one of the I guess mending attendees was reflected on the space that he took up in a class. And do you remember this one? And
Yes, vaguely, yeah.
yeah, and he was like, you know, I'm always putting up my hand, I'm always answering the question. But, you know, after learning about this, I've decided to step back in a way. And all of a sudden, the dynamics of the class changed, where more people were getting involved. And, you know, he's like, obviously, I would put up my hand after a certain period of time to answer a question, but just more people got involved. And he was like, I really hope that, you know, people became more engaged with me kind of almost stepping aside in a way, and just like allowing the class to, you know, understanding what your position is in a classroom as a white male able-bodied presence.
And I do remember that conversation now. Um, yeah, and I think that's so important. It's, I mean, particularly in my own experience, when we were talking earlier about kind of being more assertive, like it's a fine line too of, you know, expressing like my thoughts, my opinions, but also holding space for other people and being respectful of that space. Um, and it's challenging. It's not easy, and it takes constant communication and open dialogue to to make sure that everyone's needs are getting met and everyone's kind of getting the opportunity. So.
Mm-hmm. Jade on our Facebook was saying, I work in an industry that has me speaking to men privately. I find because I'm a stranger, they tell me a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, very common.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, is there any last words or last final thoughts that you have, either about the MENding program or about really anything in regards to men engaging other men in ending gender-based sexual violence?
Well, I hope to be having more of these conversations with people in my community. I hope to be spending more time engaging with other men. And I hope if you find this work interesting, or if this is something you could see yourself doing, I highly encourage you to contact Alicia and get involved with the MENding crew, the
Awesome.
MENding program.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We've actually had like a good amount of people tuning in live for this one. I think it's a really important conversations, and I'm really excited to be continuing this every Wednesday. And yeah, tomorrow we're going to be talking about our text line because it's going to be launched soon, 24-hour support. So I want to thank Ryan for joining us today on this special day, and for having this conversation and opening up the dialogue. So thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alicia.
Awesome. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Remember, our supports are available with our 24-hour crisis line. Our texting line is almost about to be launched so soon. And we also have our web chat support. So thank you, everyone, so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.